Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ivy and today we're going to be talking about the 6 books that I read in January. And because I felt like 6 books wasn't a whole lot to make a whole video about, I also wanted to do a little bit of a book haul at the end of the video. You guys know that I'm really trying to limit my physical TBR, so I am going to be showing you guys the books that I have bought thus far this year and why I bought those books and how I plan on like still tackling my physical TBR. I just looked in my journal, in my book journal, and I've already bought 8 books this year, so yeah, we'll see. I'm also really trying to get better at looking directly into the camera instead of looking at the viewfinder. And when I tell you guys that the idea of not knowing what I look like right now while I speak is like really making me nervous that I look like an absolute idiot, but I'm just trying to let go of that control. Okay, before we get into the books that I read, I wanted to go over a couple quick stats of what I read. I used to hate it when people did this in their videos, and now that I'm keeping a book journal, I absolutely love it. So I read 6 books this month. 4 of them were romances, 1 was fantasy, and 1 was dystopian, and 4 were from my physical TBR, and 2 of them were from my library. Those are the only stats that I really care about. So without further ado, let's get into the first book that I read in January. I started off the month getting really back into Bridgerton. I started rewatching the show. My whole For You page on TikTok was edits of Bridgerton, so of course I had to make my reading match that, and I picked up Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. This is the 4th book in the Bridgerton series. It follows Colin and Penelope, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of Colin or Penelope in the show, so I wasn't really looking forward to this book. I ended up rating this 4.25. As you guys know, I absolutely loved Antony's book and Benedict's book, and then Daphne's book. I just felt like there was a lot that you couldn't quite look past, and I felt kind of the same way about this book. I did like a lot of aspects of it, and I do think that it made me like their characters more, and I'm getting a lot more excited for their season on the show. There is just a lot about Colin in this book that is really hard for me personally to look past. A lot of people don't get bothered by that type of stuff because it's fiction, but I personally do get bothered by it. I just did not like his character. He did a lot of unforgivable things in my book, and I just kept feeling like Penelope would talk about who Colin was, and then Colin would just do things that were an absolute 180 of who Penelope thought he was, and I was just like, do you actually know this man? Like, do you realize like how he's treating you? I don't want to give like too much away. If you've read this book, you probably know what instances I'm talking about, but all in all, I did really like it. I kind of like in this book how you can tell there's such a friendship between Colin and Penelope first. That's also kind of how Daphne and Simon's book is, and I just really liked how close you could really tell the characters were. This is also just a teeny tiny little spoiler if you haven't watched the show, so if you haven't watched the show and don't want to be spoiled, just skip a couple of seconds ahead. But if you have watched the show, you know that Penelope is revealed as Lady Whistledown in the first season, and a lot of people are like, oh, that doesn't happen until Colin and Penelope's book, and I just wanted to say that the way that they did that in this book was absolutely perfect. It was so sweet. It was the perfect way to end the book. I am kind of curious to see how they're going to do this in the show, because in the book, Lady Whistledown isn't quite as hated as she is in the show by some of the characters. Then I moved on to P.S. I Love You by Jenny Han. This is the 2nd book in the To All the Boys I Loved Before trilogy. This book was okay. I don't remember what I rated it. I would say it was probably like a 3-star read for me. I just personally don't connect with the characters or the story as much as I do the Summer I Turned Pretty books. I honestly think it's because I'm not the biggest fan of Peter. I remember not liking him but not remembering why I didn't like him in the first book, And in this book, I did not like him anymore. I felt like he did Laura Jean dirty in a lot of aspects of this book. I do, however, really like the family dynamics in this book, the sisters in this book, and in this particular one, they play a game of assassin that kind of lasts throughout the entire story, and I thought that aspect was really interesting. I'm going to read Always and Forever, Laura Jean, in February, so I'm very intrigued to see how this trilogy kind of wraps up because I have not watched that movie, and I watched the other 2 movies before I read the book, so I knew exactly what was going to happen in each book except for this one. So I'm very intrigued to see how this series will wrap up. Then I read Legend by Marie Lu. This was actually a reread for me. I read this in middle school at some point, and I remember really, really liking it, but never finishing the series, and I wanted to finish the series. If you have never heard of this book, this is a YA dystopian book. There isn't a ton of world building in this, which I think is one of the things that I didn't love about it. But basically, it is this dystopian society. It takes place in LA, and the West Coast has kind of broken off from the rest of the United States and kind of rules in this like dystopian society. And you take a placement test at 11, and it basically, depending on what you rank on that test, tells you where you can go and work. And we follow the character June, who comes from a wealthy sect, and she is the first person to ever get a perfect score on this placement test. And we also follow Day, who comes from a poorer sect, who fails the placement test and is kind of on the run from the government. Another thing that is super critical in this story is that there is these viruses going around. They really affect the poorer sects because the rich people can afford the vaccines and the treatments for them, as with the poor people can't. And there is a lot in the story about these viruses. So if COVID or anything like that is a trigger to you, I probably wouldn't recommend this because it feels a lot like COVID, so I probably wouldn't recommend that if that's something that you think would find triggering. I remember so much about the very beginning of this book and the very end of this book, and I did not remember the middle at all, so much that I thought maybe I never even finished the first book, and then I got to the end and I was like, no, I definitely did. And I just think that was because of the pacing of the book. The beginning, there was always things happening. The end was really fast-paced, and the middle, not a lot happened. I just think that this was really lacking world building for me. I just didn't really understand the society or why it had come to that. I'm assuming we're gonna get that explained a little bit more in the other books, and I honestly just don't think until I finish this series I will be able to properly recommend it or not recommend it to you. Then I picked up ACOTAR by Sarah J. Maas. If you have been living under a rock and you don't know what this is about, this is a YA, or it originally was a YA fantasy that is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I have a difficult time kind of getting into fantasy and getting into the world. I even had a difficult time doing that with dystopian books. So I did the audiobook first and then kind of went back and forth later on with the audiobook and the physical book. And if you want to read this book but have tried to pick it up and found it hard to get into, my sister said about how the beginning was so boring and she just could not get into it. I thought the audiobook was so interesting. I was like, this isn't boring at all. And then I would look through my book and I was like 70 pages in and I was like, well, of course I don't think this is boring because I'm listening to it and it doesn't feel like it's taking up a ton of my time. So if you want to get into this series and you feel like you just can't, I would definitely recommend the audiobook. I just listened to one that was on YouTube. I can link it down below. I heavily enjoyed this book. I rated it, I'm honestly not quite sure what I would rate it. I think I would rate it like a 4.25. Very similar to the way that I felt about the Bridgerton book, where I did love it. There were just certain things that I was like, eh. I liked all the characters. I liked the setting. I liked just kind of how it was very character focused and not really a lot was happening. Loved Lucien, or Lucien. I think it's Lucien. Loved him. He seriously was my favorite character, and I don't think he's super involved in the other books, which makes me really sad. The one thing that I will say about this book is a lot of people say that her books are kind of slower, and then the last quarter of them just so much happens. And I've read Throne of Glass, and that is how that book is, and I just was not prepared for the last 25% of this book. It was extremely sad, and I just felt so much like sorrow for our main character, to the point of where like I didn't even want to go back into the story because I knew that it was going to be sad because of everything that had happened. So yeah, I don't know, I just never had heard anybody talk about the amount of like trauma that the characters go through in this book. It was extremely sad. But I am reading the second book right now. I am reading ACOMAF, and I'm about 100 pages in, so I'm very curious to see how I feel about ACOMAF. I'm really nervous that I'm not gonna love it as much as everybody else does. So ACOTAR, 4.25 stars. I did really like this. But after this, I absolutely needed like the lightest, fluffiest read, and I finally understand why people say that they need palette cleansers. So I ended up picking up The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. And if you watched my February TBR, because it has already been up at this point, this is on my February TBR. I filmed that video before I picked up this book, and I wasn't gonna pick it up in January because I knew I put it on my February TBR, and then I was like, look, I'm not gonna force myself not to read a book that I'm really excited about because of the month that it's in. So if you watch my February TBR and you're like, why is that in there? It's in there. What are we gonna do about it? But anyway, The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I really enjoyed this book. It was such a fun YA book. If you don't know what this is about, it follows this girl named Emily, and she wakes up on Valentine's Day and finds out that her boyfriend is cheating on her. And then she wakes up the next day and it's Valentine's Day, and she kind of has to relive like this horribly awful day over and over again, kind of like Groundhog Day. This book was like laugh out loud funny. There were so many points where I found myself laughing. There were so many lines that I wanted to underline, which I don't catch myself doing a ton. I do, however, have one specific beef with this book. There is a plot, kind of like a side plot line with the main character and her family that doesn't have anything to do with romance. And I loved that plot line. I thought it was very interesting and thought it showed us a lot about our character and kind of why she behaved the way that she did. And then towards the end of the book, it was just completely like lost so we could hear about the romance. And it's not that I didn't care about the romance, I did. I just felt so strongly about that specific plot line and how I wanted to see it play out. And it was just kind of like briefly mentioned that it was over. And I was like, what? I almost felt like it had been like taken away from me. So that I was not a huge fan of, and it definitely did kind of pull me out of my love for this book. But all in all, I did really enjoy this and would recommend it. It was a very fun read. I read it in a day. And I did also want to mention that if you liked A Sun Is Always a Star, you will love this book. This book made me feel the exact same way that A Sun Is Also a Star did. And if you like this book and want that same similar feeling, I highly recommend reading that book because they are very similar and just kind of illuminate the same feeling. I still wasn't feeling happy after that book, so I picked up another really light, fluffy book. I picked up the first book in the Heartstopper series, and this book is so hyped up and it has such a huge fan base to it that I was really worried that I wasn't gonna love it as much as everybody else did. This is a graphic novel, which I do just want to say, like, I need to pick up more graphic novels. I had the best time reading this. But I just figured because it was a graphic novel and there isn't as many words that I wouldn't feel is connected to the characters. You guys, if a book has hype, it probably has hype for a reason. This was so stinking cute. This was seriously like the cutest book I've ever read. I felt so excited for the characters to get together and for them to realize that they liked each other and for them to tell each other that they liked each other. I was just so excited and so happy reading this. And by the end of it, I was like on the edge of my seat because I was just like so excited like for these characters. Which leads me to what I bought in the book haul. Anyway, this is the 6th book that I read in the month of January. I'm currently filming this on the last day of January and have a feeling that I'm probably going to spend a lot of my evening reading. So if I read a book, I'll just count it for February. But let's get into everything that I have bought I guess in January, because this is the first month of the year. I don't have a super aesthetic book journal. I kind of just do it for fun, but I love the page. I don't want to show you this page because it's not as pretty. I love the page that I have for the books that I have bought. I guess that totally gives away what I've bought, but that's okay. So the first book that I bought this month was The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I bought this because I'm in Sarah Caroli's book club, which if you haven't joined and you watch Sarah Caroli, I would really recommend joining it. I'm so far having a really good time being on that Patreon, but obviously, like I said, I already read it, so I will still definitely participate in the book club discussions. I will just already know what happens. Then I also bought another Valentine's Day read, and that is X's and O's by Amy Lee. A lot of people say Leah, but I thought it was Lee, so if you know which one it is, please correct me in the comments. But as you guys know, I read Set on You last year and really enjoyed it, and this follows her sister, Crystal's sister in Set on You. That's what this book is about, and I absolutely loved her in that book, and this is based around Valentine's Day, so I obviously had to get it so I could experience Valentine's Day in books as well. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows Tara, who is a nurse and also is a bookstagrammer on the side, and she moves in with I guess Trevor moves in with her, and Trevor is this girl crazy firefighter. He has no interest in getting into a relationship and is just kind of what is the word I'm looking for? Not a playboy, a player. He's kind of a player, and Tara is this absolute hopeless romantic, and she decides that she is going to visit every single one of her exes in hopes of finding like her own second chance romance, because she needs this date to this Valentine's Day ball. So she's gonna like go visit all of her exes and see if one of them will be her date. And yeah, so it sounds like a fun, cute little rom-com. I'm very excited for this. I really enjoyed her writing style in the last book by her, so I definitely think this is going to be one that I will really enjoy. And then of course I had to pick up ACOTAR by Sarah J Maas so I could continue on with the series. I do want to say that I was like not even 50% into ACOTAR and just kind of gave up on not creasing the spine, and this one is like so beautifully floppy, like incredible. Why couldn't ACOTAR be like this? But this is the second one in the ACOTAR series. Again, I will be reading this one this month, and I'm very, very excited to see what I think of it. Then the next couple of books, I'm still going to talk about them even though I don't physically have them now, because I did buy them in January. But these are the books that I bought when Barnes & Noble had their 25% off the pre-sale books. Again, like I said, I'm really trying to decrease my physical TBR and buy books that I know I'm going to read right away as soon as I get them. And these were books that I already knew I wanted to buy, and I figured if I could save a little bit of money, I might as well do that. I also have written down in my book journal how much I spend on every book, and I ordered 5 books from that sale, and they averaged out to be like 10 bucks a book, which seriously, 5 brand new books for $50, such a good steal. So the first book that I bought on that sale was If I Had Told Her, which is Finney's POV of If He Had Been With Me. This comes out in October, and I am so excited to read this. I think I'm more excited to reread If He Had Been With Me than I am to read the new book. I also bought Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. This is written by the same author as Every Summer After. Every Summer After wasn't my favorite, but I did enjoy the writing style, and honestly, can you pass up this cover? It's so pretty. I love it. And then the last book that I pre-ordered is Once More with Feeling by Alyssa Sussman. You guys know I loved Funny You Should Ask whenever it came out. A lot of people hate that book, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm really hoping that it wasn't like a fluke for me. And I also enjoy Once More with Feeling. I just realized I didn't even tell you guys what those last 2 books were about, and I realized it's because I don't know what they're about. So let's get on Goodreads and read the summaries. Okay, so the Goodreads synopsis for Meet Me at the Lake says a random connection sends 2 strangers on a day-long adventure where they make a promise, one keeps and the other breaks, with life-changing effects in this breathtaking new novel from New York Times and First Global and Mail's best-selling author of Every Summer After. Fern Brookbanks has wasted far too much of her adult life thinking about Will Baxter. She spent just 24 hours in her early 20s with the attractive artist, a chance encounter that spiraled into a day-long adventure in Toronto. The timing was wrong, but their connection was undeniable. They shared each secret, each dream, and made a pact to meet 1 year later. Fern showed up, Will didn't. At 32, Fern's life doesn't look at all how she once imagined it would be. Instead of living in the city, Fern's back home running her mother's lakeside resort, something she vowed she'd never do. The place is in disarray. Her ex-boyfriend's the manager, and Fern doesn't know where to begin. She needs a plan, a lifeline. To her surprise, it comes in the form of Will, who arrives 9 years too late with a suitcase in tow and an offer to help on his lips. Will may be the only person who understands what Fern's going through, but how could she possibly trust this expensive suit-wearing Myridge, who seems nothing like a young man she met all those years ago? Will is hiding something, and Fern's not sure she wants to know what it is, but 10 years ago, Will Braxton rescued Fern. Can she do the same for him? This sounds so good. I feel like it sounds better than Every Summer After. A former pop star finds herself back in the spotlight along with an old flame from her past. In this friends to lovers meets enemies to lovers romance from the best-selling author of Funny You Should Ask, the sensational TikTok star. Oh. The sensational TikTok romance. As in Funny You Should Ask. I thought this was beginning the synopsis of the new book, which I also don't think was a TikTok sensation. Everybody was just obsessed with the cover. Anywho, Katie Rose is living the dream as America's #1 pop star, caught in a whirlwind of sold-out concerts, screaming fans, and constant tabloid coverage. Everyone wants to know everything about her and her boyfriend, Ryan, the hottest member of a boy band, Crush Zone. Katie loves to perform, but hates the impossible demands of stardom. Maybe that's why she finds herself in the arms of another Crush Zone member, Cal. Quiet, serious Cal, who's always been a good friend to Katie, is suddenly Cal with smoldering eyes and very good hands. One unforgettable night is all it takes to blow up Katie's relationship with Ryan, her career, and her whole life. Now, Kathleen Roseberger is okay with her ordinary existence and leaving her pop star image in the past. That is until Cal shows up with the opportunity of her dreams, a starring role in a Broadway show he's directing, and a chance to perform the way she's always wanted. The two haven't spoken since the joint destruction of their careers, and each of them blames the other, making their reunion a tense battle of wits and egos. Katie reluctantly agrees to the musical as long as she keeps her guard up around Cal, but rehearsals are long, those eyes still smolder, and those hands are still very good. Despite everything, Katie can't deny the chemistry between them. Is it ever a good idea to reignite old flames, especially if you've been burned in the past? This sounds so good. That sounds so good. It sounds like there's so much drama and so much tea. I'm so excited to read that. So when I was ordering those books, you need to spend a certain amount at Barnes & Noble's to get free shipping. And when I went to check out, it said that I was saving like $2 basically because it was $8 for shipping, and I needed to add about $20 in my cart to get free shipping. And these books were buy one get one 50% off. So I made the amount that I needed to spend, and I also got 2 books that I'm extremely excited to read, and that is the second 2 Heartstopper books. The reason why I didn't get the third is because I like to buy from an independent local bookstore to me when I can, so I just bought enough to reach that limit to get free shipping. And yeah, so this is the first one. Look at this cover. I'm obsessed with the way that these books look, and I feel like they look so pretty on a bookshelf. And then here is the third one, which she is chunky compared. Look how thick she is compared to the other two. I am so stinking excited to finish that series. I'm really excited to honestly start the second one because the first one led off on a note that I needed to know the ending. Thank you guys so much for watching. That is everything that I read and bought in January. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked this book content, check out my book video playlist. I have a ton of other book content, and make sure you subscribe because I'm always making new. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.